Muscle tightness is one of the most common symptoms that people experience in our society today. But so often, the way that we go about trying to address the muscle tightness only addresses, like I said, the symptom and not the actual issues that are underlying it. If you've listened to any of our podcast episodes in the past, you may have heard this idea of wanting to get your muscles contracting better in order to help other muscles relax. Well, in today's episode of the Exercise is Health podcast, we are going to be dissecting this idea and giving you real life examples of what we've experienced within ourselves and discuss why exactly this may be. We're going to cue the intro song and then we're going to dive right into this conversation. Welcome to the Exercise is Health podcast, where we're talking about exercise, health, and the interconnectedness of the two. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we will be coming to you every single week from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Exercise is Health podcast. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie.
And we're coming to you from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg, here in Schaumburg, Illinois, where we believe that your health is your most valuable asset. And the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise is geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. Now, if you're looking for a way to build the health and function of your muscles at home using minimal equipment and in under 25 minutes, then you are going to love the MAS Home Workouts Bundle. This bundle includes over 100 workouts that are all video guided by myself and Julie, where we are showing you exactly what you need to be doing in order to build the health and function of your body at home using minimal equipment and in under 25 minutes. So to learn more about this bundle and download your copy today, go to homeworkout.matschaumburg.com. So today we are discussing this idea of muscle tightness and why muscle tightness itself may just simply be a symptom of something bigger that is going on within your body, such as other muscles not contracting well. And this idea was first brought to light for us by Greg Roscoff and the MAT education process that both Julie and I have gone through. And through this education process and through what we've experienced with ourselves and with our own clients, we want to share some of our experiences and help to articulate this idea of why muscle tightness may not be the thing that you're actually wanting to address, even though that's the symptom that you're wanting to address.
If you have ever had a tight muscle, what is the first thing you think about? Right? Let's get rid of this tight muscle. What can I do to alleviate this tight muscle? And so we go to things and modalities or drugs that help relax muscle tissue. And for so long, people do this over and over and over again. And we almost never take a step back and say, well, I wonder if this is really working. And I wonder if what I'm doing, taking a muscle relaxer, stretching, foam rolling, anything that addresses tight muscle tissue directly, I wonder if these things are actually solving my problem. And very rarely do we ever ask the question, is there something else going on? Is there some other thing that might be creating this tight muscle symptom? And we keep saying the word symptom because generally tight muscles are present for a reason. They're there not by mistake, and they're there for a reason as a result of something else, some other cause. And so today we want to share a few of our stories and also share the theory that we see play out time and time again of how muscle tension or creating more muscle tension in some muscles can create muscle relaxation or an alleviation of that tight muscle in those symptomatic muscles.
Yeah, I would say muscle tightness is one of the more common symptoms that we hear about, whether it's, tight hamstrings, tight hip flexors, tight low backs, even like tight shoulders and tight calves. I hear about a lot from people like, every time I go walking, like my calves really tighten up. And I can relate. I mean, for the longest time, my body was really tight as well and experiencing these different types of tightness. And in fact, one of the biggest areas where I felt it was in that right hamstring area. And I can say that when I start to feel that tightness coming on now, as soon as I get worked on with muscle activation techniques, what's super cool is it doesn't even have to be the hamstring area that gets worked on. A lot of times it's getting my trunk worked on or getting my feet worked on, getting those muscles contracting better. That will allow my hamstrings to start to relax. And it is a huge difference from before the session to after the session as far as what I'm feeling in my body from a tightness perspective.
Charlie, one story that specifically stands out in my head, because it's always a fun one when the two areas are really far apart. I remember one day you lay down on the table to get work done. I was working on you and you're like, my shoulder and my neck really, really bothering me. And I remember thinking, okay, well, we're probably going to work on your shoulder or your neck, because your neck and shoulder are bothering you. And we do our assessment and I find out that we need to really work on your feet. And I'm like, well, great, because I always want you or any of my other clients to get up off the table feeling better, even though we don't with MAT go after symptoms, meaning when you get worked on with MAT, it's not a symptom reducer. Although sometimes you get off the table, and very often you get off the table and you feel a lot better because things are functioning better. A lot of times symptoms are a result of things not functioning well. So we do the assessment on you and I'm like, great, we're going to work on his feet. I sure hope that this changes his symptom in his shoulder and his neck because I want you to feel better. But at the same time, I can only work on the areas that aren't functioning well because that's what MAT does. It restores muscle function. So we look for where are you not functioning well. We do not look for where are you hurting, right? So I work on your feet and I'm like, okay, I have no idea what this is going to do for your shoulder. I know your feet are functioning better because that's where your body was telling me that we needed to work on. And you get off the table and you're like, wow, my shoulder feels amazing. I was like, wow, okay, that is crazy. And it's always a fun session when the areas of the body are so far apart, although that doesn't always happen. A lot of times we'll see, shoulder issue and it's a trunk thing. And those are very obviously closely located and also closely related. They share the same musculature. Whereas the shoulder and the feet, they don't share joints and they don't share musculature directly. So it's always an interesting session. But I remember that one specifically because that was just a reminder to me, even as a practitioner and as a human, that hey, MAT is looking to restore function. And the only symptoms that we're going to get rid of is when they're caused by a lack of function. But there's so much power to restoring function. And I wish more people knew about how powerful and how potent it is to restore function in how their body feels and functions as they move around their world and move around in their workouts and move around in their life, because it is so powerful. And oftentimes we don't even know what symptoms it's going to change until we start working on someone.
Yeah, it's really incredible just how interconnected our bodies are as far as the different areas of the body and what we may be experiencing as a symptom in one area actually being caused by, Julie, like you're saying, a lack of function or a lack of your muscles working well in a different area of your body. Now, Julie, I know that for the longest time you had experienced tightness in one area of your body, but was actually being contributed largely to issues in other areas of your body. You want to tell us about that?
Yes. Sure, I will. And this is actually not a muscle tightness, but it's a tightness in a tissue. And you guys have probably heard the name plantar fasciitis. And that is when there's a lot of tension in the tissue or area of your body called the plantar fascia. So if you look at the bottom of your foot, and there is a tissue that runs from your toes to your heel. So think of it, it's almost like the sole of your shoe, but it's passive tissue that your body has. So anyways, when you have this diagnosis or this symptom called plantar fasciitis, it just means that tissue, that area is inflamed. And usually it's inflamed because there's too much tension in it. And it's not that you're born with this. It's not like a congenital abnormality. It is actually usually people will develop it from overusing their body. And I want to say overusing their feet, but you'll understand in a few minutes why I don't just mean overusing your feet. So it's an overuse type thing, and things will get inflamed and it might get super tight. And I know that it gets super tight, not because I've read some study, but because some people get it snipped because it's too tight. Like there's a process where it's like, hey, this area is too tight. We'll snip it and relieve the tightness. So anyways, I had that for a very, very long time. And I actually had it, I think like 8 to 10 years. I struggled with it for a really long time, doing all the symptom management things like wearing orthotics, staying off your feet, going to the podiatrist, getting it checked out. I had everything looked at from like my knees down because if my feet hurt, it must be something close to my feet. And I remember the first time I was exposed to MAT, the person that was working on me was like, hey, get on the table. I want to show you this thing that I do. And he just looked at my body. I didn't tell him any of my symptoms. I didn't even tell him I had fasciitis, even though that was a very significant symptomatic area of my body. And we worked on core muscles and we worked on the trunk, and he said, well, this is where you're not functioning well, so let me work on the function there. So we worked on the function there. I was thinking in my head while I was getting worked on, well, this is kind of dumb because my core feels fine. I don't have low back pain. I don't have any of that normal core weakness. I hadn't had babies. There's been no stress on my trunk and core. Why would I be dysfunctional there? So anyways, he told me it was dysfunctional, so we worked on it. And after I was worked on it in my core, it was the first time my feet didn't feel like they were going to snap in half when I stood up. And so this was crazy to me because number one, I didn't even tell him I had symptoms there. He just looked for where the dysfunction was. And number two, I couldn't believe that something not related to my knees or my feet was so strongly changing my symptoms in my feet. So my core was changing how my symptoms in my feet were feeling for me. That is also my story of how I got into MAT, but it's also a great story about how when you increase tension, you increase contraction, you increase function in the dysfunctional areas of your body, oftentimes areas that are symptomatic and having symptoms of tightness, whether that is in a passive tissue like I had in the fascia or an active tissue like in a muscle, that tightness will often change or stop being tight because the other areas of your body are working better.
Yeah, I love that story, Julie, because like you're saying, it so clearly highlights the way that dysfunction can be present in one area, but the symptom can be present in a completely different area. And like you said, you had that symptom of plantar fasciitis for, possibly even upwards of a decade, which is a really long time if you think about it, to have kind of dysfunction somewhere else going on, like under the radar, completely unaddressed. And it's not like you were feeling any kind of low back pain or low back tightness or anything like that. There weren't any cues or indications that you were picking up on that would say, oh yeah, there's some kind of dysfunction going on with my core. All that was popping up on your end from a symptom perspective is what was happening with your feet. And so it took kind of another set of eyes and a third party to look at things independent of the symptoms and say, okay, well, I know this is where your body is feeling tight, but this is where it appears to me that there is some issue with dysfunction going on. And by getting that dysfunction addressed, then the tightness, the symptoms, those could start to dissipate some. So I know that it seems like, well, this can be a little bit out there from a, well, does it really mean that like anything in my body could be contributing to anything that I'm experiencing? And, there's a very systematic process that we go through with MAT to try to figure out like where in your body you have potential issues going on that may be contributing to what you are experiencing. So it's not just like throwing something against the wall with a blindfold on and saying, okay, well, we're just going to pick anything and just, kind of work there and see what changes. There is a very specific process that we go through with MAT, but I do want to share an analogy with you so you can start to maybe see a little bit more why what you may be experiencing from a symptom perspective as far as muscles feeling tight may actually be the result or be caused by other muscles not working well enough. So imagine that you are at your office and you're at a team of 5 people, okay? And all of you get assigned a project that needs to be done by the end of the week. All right. And so the first day, you kind of divvy up roles and responsibilities, and you know who is going to do what. And then you're going to start putting that plan into action. The second day, let's say a couple people end up calling in sick. They decide that, I can't come into the office today. I can't work remotely, but you know that your project still needs to get done by the end of the week. So instead of 5 people doing the job of 5, you now have 3 people doing the job of 5. Well, here's the thing is, for a day, you may be able to kind of compensate around those 2 other people not being there, right? You might be able to say, okay, well, we're going to divide the workload a little bit more. We might have to stay a little bit longer. We might have to do a little bit extra, but, we can still get this done for today. Well, what if that was Tuesday? What if on Wednesday, another person in your group calls in sick? So now instead of 3 people doing the job of 5, it's 2 people doing the job of 5. So now you're like, okay, well, we need to divide the roles and responsibilities even more, which is more work for you, which means you're staying even longer, putting in more hours, and maybe you're starting to feel a little bit tired, a little bit overworked, a little bit exhausted from having to compensate around other people not being there. Well, what if on Thursday, that last person that was in the group with you, they also call in sick? So now it's you doing the work for everybody. Well, by the end of the day on Thursday, after you've been trying to make up for people on Tuesday and Wednesday, and now the entire group on Thursday, how do you think you're going to be feeling? Are you going to be feeling like all loosey-goosey, relaxed, and just enjoying life? No, most people, if you're thinking about this scenario, you're feeling uptight, overstressed, overworked, and feeling like you yourself need to take some time off. All right. Well, here's the problem with that. If you decide on Friday that you're not going to come into work, what happens with the project then? It doesn't get done. The work doesn't get done. So instead of saying, well, you know what, I'm just not going to come into work, even though I definitely need a break, what would be a way to kind of give yourself less work to do, but still make sure the project gets done? You got to find the 4 other people on your team, get them back into the office with you, and then you can all work on the project together. That way more gets done and it's less stress for you. It's more equally distributed across everybody else. So how this relates back to muscles is oftentimes when we're feeling something within our body that is feeling tight, that is feeling achy, that is feeling overworked, that can be a sign or symptom that that area is having to do too much for other areas that aren't able to do enough. All right. In Julie's example, her feet may have been having to do too much for her trunk that wasn't doing enough. By getting her trunk muscles working better, that could relieve the stress that her feet were experiencing. With me, my shoulder muscles and up into my neck may have been trying to do too much for dysfunction that was happening, throughout the rest of my body, lower than my shoulders. So, like Julie was saying, it probably stemmed from my feet, but that was causing, my hips to compensate, my back to compensate, and it was all culminating in this symptom that I was experiencing in my shoulders and in my neck. All right. So if you are, following this analogy, if you think, okay, well, it would be really nice if I could just take that one day off. Well, that's fine and well, but remember, the project doesn't get done. The end of the day, the goal is that the project needs to be done. And so the way to do that and kind of minimize and reduce your stress is to get all of your team members back on board, and then you can all help out and kind of work together and get that project ready to go for Friday.
I absolutely love that analogy because I think we can all relate to a situation like that where it's irritating and annoying and it makes us upset when we're having to do the work for others. It's like, why can't that person just do the work they're supposed to do? You do what you're supposed to do. I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. And when you ask me to do what you're supposed to do, it's irritating and stressful, but the work is still getting done. Our bodies do that all the time. And what that's called is compensation. For a little while, compensation can keep us afloat, can keep us moving, can keep us doing the things we want to do. Is it as smooth as our body should be functioning? No, it's compensation. It's not the proper way or the intended way that our body would like to move, but it is a way for our body to move. The problem is when we never address the compensation the way it needs to be addressed. Oftentimes, again, we always go about this in one direction and with one thought process. If something is tight, it's bothering me, I need to get rid of that tightness. I should get rid of that tightness. But we also have to keep in mind that usually in every compensation scenario, there are muscles that aren't doing enough. And until we get muscles doing what they should be doing, the muscles that are overdoing it to overcome the lack of work that those are doing are going to stay tight. And what we often find, and the stories that we hear from almost all of our clients, is that when they do things to relieve a tight muscle without also doing things or exclusively doing things to restore the ill muscles or the muscles that aren't working well, the tight muscles almost always come back. And why is that? Our theory is that because there's a really good reason for them to get tight and stressed out again. Let's take that work scenario that Charlie just gave us. What if every single week, week after week after week, everyone was there on Monday, everyone slowly dropped off the board throughout the week, and then everyone's there on Monday and then slowly dropped off throughout the week? It's like you feel relief for a quick moment, but then all of the muscles that you tried to relieve, the tightness, they're coming back because you haven't yet addressed the core issue of why they were tight, why they were overworking. We have to always look for the underperforming muscles and make sure that they can return to normal performance so that the playing ground gets even again and less stressful on your body.
Hey, Julie, that really is a key takeaway that we would like everybody who's listening to this to leave this episode with, is the idea that, all right, if you have certain muscles that are feeling tight, that are feeling achy, that are feeling overworked, that are causing some kind of symptom within your body, or that are creating some kind of symptom or sensation within your body, there may be a very good reason why that symptom is being created by those muscles. And it may be that those muscles are actually having to do too much. They're having to do too much for other muscles that aren't able to do enough. And through our experience as MAT practitioners, through our experience in the MAT education program, you've been exposed to this idea that one of the reasons why they may be doing too much is because other muscles are not doing enough. And through the MAT process, we've been able to help ourselves and help our clients start to experience relief from those tight, overworked, achy muscles by finding the muscles that are not able to do enough. So the reason why I bring that up is because if you can relate to what we're saying, if you can relate to your body feeling a certain way, certain muscles feeling overworked, tight, achy, then we definitely recommend that you look for an MAT practitioner in your area who could assess your body and figure out where within your body you may have muscles that aren't doing enough. And by getting those muscles addressed that aren't doing enough, that can help to relieve the muscles that are doing too much. So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that is constant complaining about their back or their hamstrings or their hip flexors or some area of their body feeling too tight no matter what they try to do? Share this episode with them so they can hear our experiences and hear our perspective on what we have learned as far as what may be contributing to the tight muscles that they are experiencing. And while you're online, if you wouldn't mind, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps people find this podcast when they're looking for information on exercise and when they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us that 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week. Hey there, it's Charlie again. One last thing. I want to let you in on a secret project that I've been working on for quite some time now. I am planning on releasing a book by the middle of summer 2021. But here's the thing, because I'm self-publishing this book, there's only going to be a limited number of copies available at any given time. So to learn more about this book and to be one of the first to find out when this book actually gets released, what I need you to do is go to exerciseforlifemethod.com. There you'll find out more information as well as some exclusive bonuses that I'm offering just for simply staying in the loop with what's going on with this book. So to learn more and claim your bonuses, go to exerciseforlifemethod.com, enter in your information, and you'll be automatically kept up to date. Learn all about the book and bonuses at exerciseforlifemethod.com. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Gates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.